Welcome to my view from the piano bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here in my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings. And on Wednesday evenings, this is more about me talking about experiences or thoughts or ideas or things I'm exuberant about or things I think might be helpful for me to say. And not so much emphasis on playing, so I move the phone camera a little closer so I can talk more conversationally. You don't see as much of the piano. We move it further away on Thursday evenings when the focus is, in fact, about me playing and being my signature ridiculousness self. And I can certainly be ridiculous with my mouth open as well, and that's all so not always so compelling. So anyway, thank you to those of you who support and encourage me via the links you will find on the support page of my website, and you'll see a link to that page in the video description. The support helps to, in effect, sponsor these videos, and so I'm very much grateful for them. And if you watch with regularity, I'll ask that you consider. And regular support, such as the Patreon option, will evoke from me a thank you email each month with exclusive content, audio or video. And lately it's been a lot of video, and it probably will be a video that no one else will see. So there is that. I don't have a topic written down yet. Usually I tell you right away, okay, the topic for today is, but I want to wait to see what I do with it. I've been approaching these in recent months, and certainly from the beginning of this year and a little before, without planning ahead what I'm going to say and boxing myself in and being a little more robotic in the presentation. I'm letting myself find it, which is what I should have done all along, and it's what I do when I play piano. I let myself find it, which is kind of related to what I'm going to talk about. I'll know what the topic should be called by the time I'm done. I'm counting on that. And if I don't know what it should be called, I probably didn't make any sense, and I should try this again. So we'll see how it goes. Of course, if I try it again, you'll never know I did. So this week, I received a couple of cool little inspirations or encouragements, and I'm grateful when they come. In this ridiculous business, you need all the encouragement you can get. Right? And it's certainly coming right now from different sources, including from within. We have, as you know if you follow me, we meaning Sharon and I, have been collecting now our reviews that are coming in on the Once Upon the Summertime, the Music of Blossom Dearie CD. And there are some nice reviews coming in, and we're sharing them on our Blossom Dearie Project Facebook page, and also linking them to my Joe Holt's Notes page when I remember to do that. I'm managing several Facebook pages now, and sometimes it gets a little squirrely. And at some point, I'll get them available for people who aren't on Facebook as well. But in one of the ones we received, there is a line that is very encouraging to me, and I because it's what I want to project. I want to read that line, and then I'm going to read the last paragraph from a very nice, kind person who I've had some email exchanges with. And I've referred to people like that in these videos. I'm not always referring to the same person. There are different people who are out there being supportive and encouraging me to keep going. And particularly so with this particular focus, the kind of inside the process thing. And he said a more detailed version of kind of the same thing. And I've already been contemplating things regarding that. So I'm going to see how I do and what I hear myself say in response to these two things. The first is just a little line, I think just one sentence, yes, from the review of Once Upon a Summertime, that says, Joe Holt's piano is superb, adventurous and complementing the singer well, yet never losing the feel of the original tune. throughout his improvisation. And that's the important line. The other words are nice, but yet never losing the feel of the original tune throughout his improvisation. I could launch from there. But let me go ahead and read the last little paragraph. And if I were to read like the entire email he sent me, it would set this up. But I think the last little paragraph stands alone. And you already know who you are, and you're watching this. And I've already thanked you, but I'll thank you again. So here we go. I find that when you play, the melody of the tune is always there, always available, always in reach. Now, he just used the word always 4 times. So I take it he means always. Whether you are playing the tune note by note or freely improvising on the theme, the melody, the tune is always there for the taking. I don't find this characteristic or style in any other piano player. I think it's a magic skill, and I love it. So thank you so much for that. There's so much to unpack there, and also in the little line from the review. And unpacking this little paragraph can create a little controversy in discussion with other musicians, which happened the other day when I brought this up. This person was quick to say, yeah, but no. And then I had some more exchange with this person. Then he understood where I was coming from. And he's like, oh, well, okay. That is an amazing compliment, which he kind of didn't notice the first time when he was rebuffing part of it. And it is an amazing compliment. But I'm going to see if I can explain the connection that I feel to it that allows me not to say, boy, I'm great at something more than anybody else, and I'm this great player. Look at what this guy says. No, but to add validity, or this adding validity or validation is the word I'm looking for, to what I feel about my approach. So let's see how I do. Now, you've heard me say before that when I improvise, I can't do it in the way that most jazz players do, particularly contemporary jazz players, which you're making a lot of conscious associations and decisions about the relationships of notes and scales to chords. And then you practice those relationships and you practice finding things, and then you apply that, and sometimes just kind of cut and paste into your solos, and other times let that take you other places. Jazz is today a very cerebral process, at least in how it's presented. And I always tell people, if they want to learn to improvise piano or play jazz, and they relate to what I do, is that the last thing you want to do is start with one of those jazz improvisation books that you can buy, because it will bury you with information and potentially have you miss the point. Now, this is its own rabbit hole, but I'm talking about my view of this, which is when you are playing, you can't be really creative if you're processing through information and sort of creating something cognitively in the same way that if you can just let yourself go and allow your intuition to find things. And it's easy to go back to Kenny Werner's Effortless Mastery, which I'll suggest you read if you haven't. But what I can only do when I really get there, and if I don't really get there, I don't get there. And if I never get there, it's not going to work to do what I do. I have to get there. And getting there is about letting go and allowing it to happen. So what I know informs what I do intuitively, but it's not a part of the process. Another way to say it is, if I'm on a gig and let's say there's a horn player who doesn't know the tune. Very often, a musician will help another musician by calling out chord changes as they go. The only way I can do that is if I'm looking at a lead sheet in front of me and I'm sort of just reciting what I see. Because if I have to call out chord changes as I go, I have to almost stop playing and think about what is that here? And I'm in a minority of guys. I mean, I'm not the only one like that, certainly, but I can easily be the only guy on stage who wouldn't be able to tell you what chord he's playing, or if he did, he'd have to stop playing and analyze it and then tell you, because that's not my reference point. My reference point is the melody. It's always the melody. And I kind of feel like I used this as an example recently, but I'll go ahead for now and just use this tune, How Deep Is the Ocean, even if I did before, because every time I do something, it's a new space anyway. Right? And that melody creates a sense of forward motion that is supported by specific harmony. And it doesn't have to be exactly that harmony. It can be some other things. But what that harmony is doing is what this implies. And although there may be some different ways to do it, they're all kind of similar. They just are a little bit like, dot the T and cross the I, or move this, or dot the I and cross the T, or whatever. And so what I think about, or what I internalize, is the actual melody. And when I play the song, I actually find the harmony again. As opposed to, I remember the melody, not the harmony. Oops. While he plays the wrong first note. Now that little melody is completely real and thorough to me in telling me what needs to happen. Unlike some musicians who are like, okay, what are my chord changes again? C minor, 2/5, D minor 7, G7, A flat minor, A minor 7 flat 5, D7 flat 9, G minor, E flat altered dominant, D7 flat 9, cycle around 2/5, 2/5 to E flat. Okay, and you notice what I was doing when I was telling you chords or things about the chords, which if another musician were with me, they would know what to do with. I had to actually almost play it first and then look at it and, oh yeah. So whether it's playing it or describing it or whatever, I find it again. And I kind of think that's relatively unique of me. But you got to remember that I wasn't taught to play jazz. I did it intuitively by a lot of listening and interacting with other people. And then in my early 20s, I took 3 years of lessons with a very, very prominent jazz educator in Philadelphia, in that area, I mean, and struggled to appropriate that process, and eventually said, thank you for all the stuff I learned, which is going to help me, but thank you for also helping me understanding, this is me saying to the teacher, in essence, thank you for also helping me understanding that I can't do it. But I do play. And how do I play? Through the kind of instinctive process or intuitive process that I developed over time, piece by piece, by listening. And what I've learned primarily through these lessons is that I shouldn't question the validity of my process, because that is my process. Like it or not, I've got a wheel and I can't reinvent it, right? So the one thing that's never worked for me, and it just keeps unfolding through the years as to what that means and why it doesn't work for me, is the whole chord scale relationship thing, where you think about certain scales or certain modes over certain chords and you play them and then they lead you here and they lead you there. It's just, that's to me, it's like reading Japanese. No, it's just, no, it's Japanese. Nothing wrong with Japanese, except I don't understand a thing, you know. It doesn't mean I don't know the theory. It means it's not my process, right? And it doesn't mean I can't play nice harmonies, but it means that I never lose my connection to the melody while I'm performing. And I can make a contrast to most other jazz pianists who focus on the harmonization and then the reharmonization. And I remember one example back from my lessons when I was 20, in my 20s. Don't Blame Me. You know that tune? Don't blame me. Now, there's already like a few non-basic chords there, but that's kind of a basic thing. Then you can do some things substitution-wise to sweeten it up. But then one little exercise I was given is to pick different points of targeted resolution. So you can hear that this doesn't really resolve. And then you can stop there. Can you hear that? That's a big, long phrase. Don't blame me for falling in love with you. And there's a comma in that sentence for sure, right? Or potentially, but there's a complete thought, and it resolves. You hear musically. Now, one of the things and I haven't thought about this for decades, but I remember it now. Don't. But then when you get to this, don't blame me, you treat that as the final resolution. So, don't blame me. Then you go on. At this point, let me stop and say, there are other piano players, musicians, one I think of in particular, that would go to town with what I just did and do layer upon layer of that kind of thing just to play that little 3-note melody phrase. Because this is going to sound pejorative. I don't entirely mean it pejoratively. Maybe I do to some extent. But showing off your harmonic prowess is the name of the game to some people in jazz. So a lot of people, like contemporary jazz, is about all the cool harmonic variations and all the cool, stuff that's beyond just, the more lame swinging era stuff, right? But as soon as you do that, and here's my point, and I think I'm going to get this across. Let me know. Once you change the foundational aspect of a tune, you don't alter the tune, but you detach from the tune in order to make some other statement. And I think part of what's being talked about here is that because I don't do that, because I'm always playing against the tune in my head, not humming the tune, but the tune is informing what I do, that is communicated in what I play. Right? And I think contemporary jazz goes against that and takes the legs out from under it for the sake of being more inventive and more creative in terms of how that qualitatively or even quantitatively is defined by contemporary jazz. So let me take Don't Blame Me, since I do remember playing How Deep is the Ocean. Now, I haven't played Don't Blame Me in forever, except for working it through with one student. So if I'm playing on that harmony, now maybe you don't agree with my internet friend who says, whatever you were doing, the melody is always in reach. Well, think about that and what that means to you. But it is always accessible harmonically. Now, there's a prominent jazz pianist in my greater regional area who famously is masterful at the three harmonization. But what that can do, and I've seen it happen, is it can throw off a singer who's being accompanied. Because now the melody that they're hearing is not supported by the harmony. And what do? And it becomes this sort of thing where they have to decide, do I sing against it? Do I not even hear it anymore? What is it? And do I alter it? And I've seen, singers struggle in that environment. But then with this particular pianist, another singer has just said, I like hearing, it's fun to hear that because it opens up places to go that I wouldn't have thought of. Okay. But, and that's cool. But if that happens, wouldn't you think that that is a bit counterproductive to keeping the tune always in play? Right? So jazz tends to focus on what's being tried and what succeeds within a tune. A tune just becomes something that eventually can be discarded, even though you're still playing it for the sake of being creative. For example, the one time I went to hear Chick Corea live, a solo, not because he's my favorite. I respect him tremendously, not because he's my favorite player as far as what I relate to and what I want to listen to. But I know it was just so important to go hear him. And he was getting, a few requests caught up from the audience from like famous tunes of his. And he really didn't want to play them. And he said something like, and it was interesting, he just came out and said this. It says, well, I'm just going to improvise over them. And it's like, those tunes won't even be there because I'm improvising over them. He basically didn't want to subject his tunes to his own improvisation. Now figure that. So he wanted to play other known tunes because this is implied now, but I think tacitly stated. He doesn't feel the same connection to them, so he doesn't feel obligated, and he wants to protect his tunes from what he might do to them. Now, there's a little bit of a stretch, but that's very connectable to what he said. And then relating to this. So I think I've said this too. the first lesson I had with this teacher, back when I was in my 20s, he said, "Joe, are you sure you want to go down the road of these lessons?" Because he knew what I wanted to accomplish, because I didn't understand, a lot of stuff that was going on in jazz. I just played, and I felt I was inferior or deficient because I didn't approach it that way. And I later learned that that was not the right framing. Right? But he said to me, "Are you sure you want to do this, Joe? Do these lessons? Because the longer you go down this road, the more you're going to diminish your audience." That was our first argument of many, respectful arguments, but arguments nonetheless. Because the idea of diminishing the audience would not occur to me because I'm always conscious of the audience, right? And I guess very deeply, tacitly, very much implied, but understood in this is the audience is relating to the same tune that I am. Which is why I always like to play familiar tunes. Familiar tunes. And when you're, I guess, being creative for the sake of creativity, I guess that does diminish your audience. But when you're being creative for the sake of expressing something, then other people can feel and join with you in embracing that expression. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, that was actually so awful. I want to turn off the recording. I'm not really in a state of connection to playing right now. So I think, but it helps me just to sit and play a few notes. And gather my thoughts again. And it's like finding it again. It's like, that's my whole experience every day. Whatever I'm doing, losing it and finding it. Whether it's my keys or whether it's, there's a couple of things I've lost that I just brought in from the car. I don't know where they are. I got some checks at the post office yesterday. Brought them in the house. Have not been able to find them. And it's not that I don't have a place for these things. It's just that even things that I'm physically touching, they go away, and then I have to find them again. And that's I don't want to say I'm resigned to that. I embrace that. In order to not be that, I have to take Adderall. And even if I wanted to, and there was a time when I did, even if I wanted to, and I decided at some point, I'm not doing that anymore because that's getting in the way of who I am. I couldn't anyway because of a little side effect complication that I couldn't take that medicine if I wanted to right now, if we were going to call it medicine. So I'm always finding whatever it is again, which is okay, and which I'm going to try to talk about, which is, and this is the more esoteric side of this, always being connected to the big picture. And this is something I really had to put into focus for myself. And in recent years, I've become comfortable saying, and if you read my online journal, my blog, you'll see it reflected there, and you'll hear me talk about it, that I only have a wide-angle lens. And I have to navigate through the wide-angle lens. And let's add another perspective to that, put that here, and then say, to acknowledge that ultimately everything is interconnected to everything else. And scientifically, that's really becoming verifiable with quantum entanglement and all sorts of other things. But it's something that, deep thinkers and spiritually minded people and teachers have known forever, that there is interconnectedness, right? And when you're a big picture guy and you see the big picture and you can't keep the details in front of you, but you got to handle the details, what do? Well, you acknowledge that as you're embracing the big picture, that detail's in there. And you kind of remember where it is, and you go inside your own picture, right? And there it is. You can only hold it for so long. It's kind of like, going underwater and needing to come up for air. Maybe I'm like a dolphin, right? Where I live down here, I have to come up every so often and breathe up here. I like that illustration. Never thought of that. See, that's why these things are good to do. It's also good not to title it right away. Like a dolphin, right? Maybe I'll use that, right? And anything that's down there that Mr. Dolphin is dealing with, he has to come and go from, right? Because I always find it again. And the it I'm finding when I'm improvising, it's the structure of the tune. Now, one thing that I've experimented with in the recent decade or two, I mean, I've always done it, but it's the idea of improvising freely and subjecting it to intuition. And I typically don't do it in public because it's hard to get in that space when you know people are watching. And I haven't really figured out how to make that appropriately structured for performance. But I'm in that random space, and I've got some recordings that I made myself. It's saying something. I have no idea what it is, but I haven't learned how to find that again. They're all new every time, but an existing form I can find again. So I guess that particular ability lends me to want to do things with free improvisation. And I've tried. What you can't see here, and I'm not going to move the camera because that would disrupt things, but there was a CD I self-released over a decade ago now. Oh, good night. Has it been 15 years? Maybe. Stories Without Words. And it was back when I was doing a local radio program on a couple of stations, and I would record it once a week at the church where I was on staff. And the sound guy would come over and he would run the recording for me. And I'd have to use a keyboard because the church didn't have a piano. And I would record one just freely improvised thing. Before the show, and I have about 160 of them, which is about how many weekly shows I did before that just kind of ended. And I never really poured through them totally thoroughly, but I got the idea that, hey, let me have some stuff here, and I sort of went through them, picked out 20, and released them in this Stories Without Words. And, there's definitely something going on, but not to my satisfaction, and something that I can identify with in a way that focuses me, as to what to do with it. I think that's all a work in progress. But there are things that have come from that, right? But I can also get lost in it and just not create the kind of structure. Now, there's one of them that I titled If Only, because there are a few YouTube posts of. And the one that I want you to listen to, one of two, is the one from the recording. There's a YouTube generated post of it that shows the Stories Without Words CD cover. And there's one that I posted where I used pictures of my daughter's trip to Europe when she was in high school. So it was like a picture collage thing going on. And I tried to perform it a few times. I actually tried to transcribe it, and but I was trying to recreate something, and it was okay and everything, but it didn't get there, and I need to take those YouTube posts down, probably, find them. But the point is that in transcribing it, it showed me that there was a lot of structure I put in there, and it was tonal. It wasn't an outside or anything, and it's like it did give me validity that like I am doing stuff, and it helped me understand the validity of my intuition. But as far as being able to find it again and having it organized, like if I write a song, I'm going to forget it immediately. A real songwriter, Beth McDonald, a real songwriter, burned in her the song, the lyrics, the tune, the nuance, everything. So when I accompany her on her originals, I have to know them well enough to be able to find them again. Now, you'd think I should say, know them well enough to remember them. Well, yeah, conceptually I do. But as far as in the specific way that she wants, I find it again. Everything I do, I'm finding again. And that's why it's so important for me to put myself in the space to do it. So let me read those 2 comments again now, in light of what I've said so far. And I probably am not going to call this like a dolphin, but I have to think more about that approach. Okay. Joe Holt's piano, superb, which is not actually relevant, but it's a nice word. Thank you for using it. Adventurous and complimenting the singer well, yet never losing the feel of the original tune throughout his improvisation. I actually did take this and I put this on the testimonials page under the listeners say, because we're not actually going to reference this entire review, but I pulled out this line and I condensed it. Superb, adventurous, yet never losing the feel of the original tune. Right? And so, never losing the feel of the original tune, yet being adventurous. Right? Or somebody else used the words once, another musician, harmonically fearless, which means I'm willing to go places and do things, but never losing the feel of the original tune. Isn't that a contradiction? Well, I think holding that contradiction, because I am, and you know me, if you hear me play, I can be absolutely ridiculous. And it's being ridiculous while being connected to something larger, something pre-existing that's recognizable as being in there. So that's my thing. And I say this, I guess, tongue-in-cheek, as I'm reluctant to say words like this about myself. That could be related to whatever I would define as my superpower, while at the same time, the lack of doing some of those reconstruction things, because I just don't feel them and my mind doesn't work that way, that a lot of jazz players do, that could be considered a handicap. That could be considered something that I'm missing. That's a deficit. Right? And the deficit, looking at it through one lens, could be the superpower in the paradox of it in the other, if that makes sense. I tried to express this in an email to another friend who we were talking about this. So anyway, looking at the big picture, and within it, finding the detail. I find that when you play, the melody of the tune is always there, always available, always in reach. So even though I'm not really wired to play well, let me just play a tune. Let's see what happens. What tune do I want to play? hymn melody called Be Thou My Vision. No, I could just keep playing the tune. And of course, if I do, the tune is always there because I'm still playing it. And the first little variation I made was I stretched the timing out on the very last cadence. So this is good. That opened up my mind to something that I wanted to say and forgot, but found it again. See? And that is when you first start learning to improvise. The first thing you can do, and some contemporary jazz educators say this, others don't, but back in the early days of jazz, this was a starting point, which is just embellish the melody. Just start making little changes with the melody. In other words, focus your improvisation on the melody, not all the crazy structures. That's the starting point. Pardon my noisiness, but when I get connected, that happens. Anyhow, so in my attempt to show you how I can ornament something, just make little changes, the changes started to get bigger. And I was still I was letting go and holding on at the same time, in that I know I was demonstrating something, but primarily letting go because I have to. And the melodic embellishments became like phrases that left the melody but still incorporated the melody. So I think for all of my verbal rambling for the last 45 minutes or so, which I hope you survived, I'm not in the listening side of it, so I don't know how it came across. That was what I was trying to get to. Right? And I think that you could feel or sense that the melody didn't go away, even though I wasn't playing on it, because I was absolutely referencing it. So if I were to get deeper into space, if I wasn't, indulging in a little bit of caffeine, which I am to keep my speaking mind sharp, which does take away from this, but it's later in the evening right now, that could open up even more potentially. But do you understand how I'm getting validation from what's being said in these two things? Never losing the feel of the tune I've heard before, but how this gentleman is putting it, it's giving validation to my approach. Okay? And embellishing the melody is what all the early jazz people did. And then some players never really got away from that. And I could get some arguments from historians, music historians about this and throwing out examples. So I'm just going to do this loosely. Tommy Dorsey comes to mind. He had, things he did to work around the melody or do phrases that he repeated, but he didn't do a major development, move away kind of thing. He wasn't a jazz player in the bebop and beyond sense. And some people will look at him and say, well, he didn't play jazz because he didn't really improvise. Of course he did improvise. But him and others, Louis Armstrong, were in a place where they were relating to the melody. When jazz became more, shall we say, experimental, right? It became more about looking for the possibilities in the harmony than playing the melody or referencing the melody. But what if I said looking for possibilities in the melody instead of the harmony? Does that box me in one regard? Yes. But I wonder if, in a way I can't explain, it frees me up in another. Right? And maybe I should just leave that there in the esoteric scheme of things. I figured if I sat and played something, the other thing that two things came to me at once. That being one, and there was something else, and now that's gone. Oh well. So I'm a little uncomfortable doing this, but in the continual pursuit of understanding where I am and how I can grow and what's going on and having revelations about things, I leave myself vulnerable by saying this, but I can see two things that I can define two different things that I do or that I approach that I seem to, I don't see other representatives of in the same way. Let's try this. I'm tired and not super creative, but that was like going the Dave McKenna route, right? And when Dave McKenna died in 2008, people started really paying tribute to him, and that's around the time when I really started paying attention. I was aware of him, but really started paying attention, close to that time. And I was motivated to record a CD kind of in tribute to Dave McKenna, because everybody I saw doing a tribute to him was not playing like him. He had a very unique, thing. He had his thing, and he influenced a lot of people. He wasn't taught it. He didn't know how to teach it to others. He didn't care to. He didn't want to. But it was just his own intuitive thing. And, that's something I've identified with as like, who am I? I'll call myself a Dave McKenna-ish influenced piano player. But maybe the other thing is this. Now Dave McKenna would be somebody who probably kept the melody in his mind as well, right? But I'm not sure. Right? But going beyond Dave McKenna, I don't think there I have trouble finding players. All good players take you back to the melody of a tune. And I'm not even sure I can say that what this very nice, enthusiastic person is saying is actually even true of me. Right? But to the extent it is, might be the extent that I can distinguish myself. Because we all have our own validities, our own statements. And I've said it a zillion times, I'm no great player, I have lots of deficits, but I bring things to the table that have to do with being able to make connections with people, which I guess is why I need to keep coming back to just playing familiar tunes, even though I could just sit and sort of compose on the spot, but I haven't learned how to organize that presentation well, even though I tried to release things, and you can find some things online that I might try to take down, actually, but that's a whole nother story. And actually, you can help me out by messaging me, emailing me, or commenting on your thoughts about this. Because you're helping me when you do that understand myself. Because, I don't know what the experience is like so much outside of me. I watch recordings of myself, but I'm also connected to the act of making that recording. That's a part of me, and I'm watching it being the same person who did it. So I don't have the same, connection to my playing that you do. So what was a possible title I was going to put onto this? Something to do with like always about the melody, or it all comes back to the melody, or it's the melody, stupid. All right? Maybe I'll call it that, but I don't like the word stupid. But it's a phrase that might make sense to people. And so my handicap, or my procedure, my limited procedure of always referencing the melody, might be the thing that creates this response to me. And that's the one objective thing I can take away from that, without like patting myself on the back or saying, Joe, you suck, you really should learn to do something else. Leaving all of that aside and just saying those things are probably connected, right? Because, I've tried to practice things that are typically done in jazz piano practicing, and I just hit a wall with them. And it's such a long road. And I guess that's another thing that I can point out, that it's super important when you do something to know how it is that you can get there. Or as Steve Harvey says, you define your gift by what you can do the best with the least amount of effort. Which almost sounds like cheating, except what you do the best with the least amount of effort means how you're wired to do that particular thing. And I've spent a lot of time beating myself up or trying to get myself to go through another procedure, which I think is important, because as I have those little victories, it informs other things. And I guess what I'm looking for is not here, it's over there. You've seen me put out my book of Bach two-part inventions before, right? And I think I succeeded after 50,000 times of playing it. By memorizing that first one, right? But if I don't keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and actually even when I have it memorized, I'm still finding it again. The one I really want to memorize, which I played for my college audition 9,000 years ago, and I still have to put the music in front of me. Shoot. I just gave up. I just improvised it because I can't do it. Yeah, because I want to be able to play that through without putting the music in front of me, and then get to the end. Play the tune Popcorn from like 1971 or something. Yeah, see, my brain is shot. But then go back. But actually, why can't I have a normal brain that can memorize this? Because I don't. But what I don't have also defines what I do have. So, welcome to the ridiculous world of the person who has succumbed to. Now I think about what another friend said that I referenced on this stream, observing and complimenting me that I allow myself to be vulnerable and I'm a lifelong learner. And I guess that's what I put on display all the time, ultimately, right? So what application can this have to you? Is there any purpose served by you watching this? You know, hopefully, maybe being inspired in your own process. And if you were a piano student of mine, of course, what you learned at the piano is applicable in all of life. Everything I ever needed to know in life, I learned at the piano. That you make your way someplace. And then as you do, that becomes your path to make your way to the next place. And then you make your way to the next place. And then you begin to understand how you got there. And then you begin to develop your skills of getting from one place to the next, whatever that might be. And then all of a sudden you are doing things you weren't able to do before because you are growing within you these inclinations that turn into skill sets. And then the things that you do, you can do purposefully, you can do reliably, you can do ultimately confidently. How's that? How did I do? I had to close my eyes when I did it. Because, you know, when you're in that, you know, deeper creative space, you can't focus with your eyes. So you either have to look like you're, you know, have glazed eyes, or you just close them, right? But, yeah, and I know not everybody is inclined to be so introspective, you know, and I would say to the extent that you can, you're only going to benefit from it. And of course, to the extent that I can keep my ducks in a row or my desk organized, I benefit from that too. So we all have our magic skills. That's what he said here. I think it's a magic skill and I love it. So I'm going to listen to this before I decide to title it and before I decide to actually put it out there. And thank you for encouraging me along the way in whatever that means. And I'm actually putting this up on my YouTube channel for other people to look at and think, who is this idiot? But there it is. So appreciate you. Thanks.